This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Telly Edwards. Tonight's top stories. China's top diplomat calls Canadian leader Mark Carney's visit a turning point after years of frosty ties, while Wang Yi urges deeper cooperation and eliminating interference as Canada looks to rely less on the US. Japan and the Philippines ink new security pacts, including one that's aimed at speeding up the exchange of supplies between their militaries while reaffirming support for a rules-based regional order. Taiwan says more U.S. arms sales are on the way, with 4 deals yet to reach Congress for approval. Well, this follows last month's announcement of a record package worth some $11 billion. Flush with a record profit for a second straight year, Taiwan's TSMC ramps up spending in a bold vote of confidence in AI. And Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has removed Workers' Party chief Pritam Singh as leader of the opposition and invited the WP to nominate another elected MP for the role following Mr. Singh's conviction for lying to a parliamentary committee.
From rare earths to Arctic sea lanes, China's interest in Greenland and the region comes under the spotlight. I'm Ross Cullen in Greenland's capital Nuuk, and I'll bring you the full picture later.
And meet a Gen Z sourcing agent whose job is to spot and mitigate risks for overseas clients as they import Chinese goods. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has hailed rapid progress in ties with China, saying that the stage is now set for both sides to become strategic partners across multiple fields. Now, his comments come as he begins a 4-day official visit to China, and the first by a Canadian leader in 8 years. This following months of renewed engagement aimed at repairing relations that had soured in the last Canadian administration. Well, Mr. Carney is expected to meet President Xi Jinping tomorrow as Ottawa looks to diversify trade ties amid uncertain ties with the U.S. For more, CNA senior correspondent Han Yu-Guan joins us live from Shanghai. Yu-Guan, what does Prime Minister Carney's visit represent in the context of frosty ties between the two countries over the last several years?
Well, I think the remarks from Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi pretty much encapsulates it. He calls it a turning point. Pretty much, without overstating it, it's nothing more, nothing less. In some ways, the ties are so frosty, the only way to go is up. And the most recent strain was after Canada set tariffs on Chinese EVs in 2024, following similar US curbs. China retaliated then with tariffs on Canadian farm and food products, such as canola oil and meal. Customs data show a 10% drop in Chinese imports of Canadian goods last year. But the trade war was set off by the Justin Trudeau's government. Now that there's a new Prime Minister in Canada, the time is ripe for a reset. Accelerating the drive towards a reset was the two insulting blows that Canada suffered at the hands of its southern neighbor, the United States, even after Ottawa toed the line with its longtime ally. For one, Canadian goods were also slapped with US tariffs like goods from China. Adding insult to injury, President Trump said Canada could become his country's 51st state. All of that has set the stage for a thaw in Sino-Canadian ties. That thaw gathered pace since Mark Carney took office, and there were meetings and phone calls between top officials from both sides, paving the way for the leaders' meeting in October at the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. The meetings between Carney, Xi, and a host of other senior Chinese leaders show that those ties have indeed reached a turning point. Otelli?
Now, Yu-Guan, all eyes on tomorrow's meeting. Mr. Carney expected to meet President Xi Jinping tomorrow. What is on the agenda?
Well, we know he's meeting Xi tomorrow, but we haven't seen anything by way of an official agenda from either side. But Carney has been meeting senior business executives from major Chinese firms in Beijing. in the context of a decline in Chinese imports from Canada last year. This signals a desire to boost business for Canadian businesses. Just look at the companies he's been meeting. China National Petroleum Corp, the state oil giant, could import Canadian crude for refinement. Chinese EV giant CATL or wind turbine company Envision Energy. Both can be potential importers of Canadian minerals such as copper, nickel, cobalt. Alibaba could facilitate consumer-facing imports via its cross-border platforms, while Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, or ICBC, can finance trade. We can expect Carney to press for relief on trade barriers, especially canola. But that relief is likely to come at a price. We can expect China to also push for normalization of economic ties. That would include, first and foremost, of course, the lifting of tariffs on Chinese EVs. Given the oversupply of Chinese EVs in China, this could greatly ease the price war within China and the losses or thinning profits suffered by Chinese EV companies. China would also likely want to see more strategic autonomy from Canada, for Canada to take a stance independent of the US. And most important of all, China would expect Canada to take a strong line on the Taiwan issue by abiding on the One China principle. Otelli?
Thanks for that report. CNA senior correspondent Tan Yu-Guan reporting to us live from Shanghai. Well, Japan and the Philippines have signed a new defense pact that aims to streamline logistical support in joint military trainings. Both countries have reaffirmed their commitment to a rules-based regional order.
国際情勢が複雑化する中、法の支配に基づく国際秩序の維持強化のため、ASEAN 諸国には今まで以上に重要な役割が期待をされます。中でもフィリピンは日本にとって海でつながる。
Japan is a vital strategic partner of the Philippines, and our relationship will continue to be bound by shared values of democracy, respect for the rule of law, and a commitment to peace, stability, and prosperity in our region.
The two ministers also announced a $6 million assistance from Tokyo to fund facilities to house inflatable boats that were earlier donated by Japan. This against the backdrop of simmering tensions with China. And Maria Ronson looks at the significance of this new defense pact.
This defense pact strengthens the commitment of both the Philippines and Japan for closer security and economic ties. Philippine Foreign Affairs Secretary Maria Teresa Lazaro earlier hailed the relationship, calling it the closest and the most productive in the Indo-Pacific region. And the visiting Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi also highlighted their shared values for closer ties. Expected to further promote bilateral collaborative activities, it will allow the armed forces of both countries to fulfill their respective roles more efficiently in joint training and activities, will hopefully contribute to international peace and security, among others. The significance of this agreement is it will enable the respective forces to engage in activities that will uphold international peace and security, among others, but more importantly, to ease and avert conflict and tension in the disputed waters in the South China Sea. Japan and the Philippines are in the midst of separate territorial conflicts with Beijing in the East China Sea and the South China Sea, which have continued to flare and threaten to draw in the United States, a treaty ally of the two Asian nations. Both have vowed to oppose unilateral attempts to change the status quo in these disputed waters. It is important to note, however, that both officials also stressed their shared commitment to rules-based order and the importance of resolving their disputes peacefully.
Well, we'll be getting more insights into the bilateral ties between Japan and the Philippines, as well as tensions in the region, because we'll be speaking with foreign policy and security analyst Lucio Blanco Pitlo III later this hour. Taiwan says that more U.S. arms sales are in the works, with 4 deals yet to be formally notified to Congress. Well, the remarks follow last month's announcement of a package worth up to $1 billion, the largest ever for the island. Well, if you recall, China reacted angrily. The deal made last December covers 8 items, including HIMARS rocket systems and munition drones. China carried out war games around Taiwan shortly after that arms sales was announced. Taipei has been seeking to step up its defenses amid growing Chinese military activity around the island. Washington, the island's most important international backer and arms supplier, has strongly backed its push to boost military spending. Meantime, Taiwan says that it has located the black box of an F-16 fighter jet that had crashed into the sea last week. The single-seat F-16V vanished off Taiwan's east coast on 6 of January, about 70 minutes into a routine night training flight. The pilot is still missing, but is believed to have ejected before the jet went down. Officials say signals from the aircraft's black box were detected and its location fixed. Taiwan's Air Force says search teams have been working round the clock by air, sea and along the coast, but so far no results have been found. And it adds that a professional team will now move in to recover the aircraft while the search for the missing pilot continues. The crash comes as Taiwan pushes the U.S. to speed up its delivery of 66 F-16V jet order to replace its aging fleet. Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has removed Workers' Party chief Pritam Singh as leader of the opposition with immediate effect. That's after Parliament on Wednesday deemed him unsuitable for the role. Prime Minister Wong says the decision is necessary to uphold the rule of law, as well as the dignity and integrity of Parliament. Well, on Wednesday, the House voted in favour of a motion to express regret over Mr. Singh's conduct. The alternate GRC MP was convicted by a district court for lying to a parliamentary committee over the Raisa Khan case and had his appeal rejected. Now, despite the verdict, Mr. Singh maintained his innocence. Prime Minister Wong says the conviction and Parliament's view make Mr. Singh's position untenable. In a letter to the Workers' Party's Central Executive Committee, Prime Minister Wong invited the party to nominate another elected MP to serve as the next LO. The nominee, he says, should not have been implicated in earlier findings of the Committee of Privileges, and that includes WP Chair and alternate GRC MP Sylvia Lim. Prime Minister Wong adds that whoever holds the office of the LO must uphold the highest standards of honesty and integrity and command the trust necessary to carry out its responsibilities. Among them are leading the opposition in debates and representing Parliament at state functions. In a statement, the Workers' Party says it will deliberate on Prime Minister Wong's letter carefully and respond in due course. Mr. Singh first held the leader of the opposition role in 2020. At that time, then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said that the results of the GE 2020 showed a strong desire among Singaporeans for a greater diversity of views in politics. He said that the LO role was meant to recognize this desire while letting the country's political system evolve in a way that maintains its sense of national purpose. Mr. Singh was given the role again after GE 2025 by Prime Minister Wong. Now, political analysts say Prime Minister Wong's decision is built on taking a principled ground, that is for Singaporeans to have trust and confidence in the leadership and in the integrity of Parliament.
So I think, even if there's a political cost, I would say that the ruling party would have determined, that this is a price that must be paid. And I suspect that, they will hope that Singaporeans can see where they're coming from, that this is not politicking, but rather trying to reinforce an important principle of governance.
A time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China is drafting rules to cap purchases of advanced AI chips, potentially allowing limited sales by NVIDIA instead of an outright ban. Plus, Beijing moves early to support growth, trimming select interest rates and hinting at further cuts. Hello again. Welcome back to East Asia Tonight. We are joined now by Roland Lim, who has the latest in business. Roland, geopolitics apparently heating up in the semiconductor race?
You are spot on, Oteli. TSMC crushes it with its full-year earnings, but China is blocking NVIDIA's H200 chips opening doors for its rivals. And Korea also ramps up investment to challenge TSMC's dominance. But for now, it's game on for TSMC. The Taiwanese chipmaking titan announced a forecast-busting net profit for the fourth quarter, marking 2 straight years of blockbuster earnings. This in a sign of sustained global demand for artificial intelligence technology. Now, TSMC logged more than $120 billion in revenue for last year, and that's up more than 30% on year. Net profit also up more than 46%, coming in at $55.2 billion. Asia's most valuable company has ramped up capital expenditure over the past few years to meet demand for chips, spending almost $200 billion since 2020 to expand its overseas production capabilities. And it has forecast to spend around $56 billion this year, and that's up at least a quarter from last year. Experts say the bullish outlook suggests the AI race is only accelerating. Last March, the chipmaker announced a $100 billion investment pledge in the US, which includes at least 5 plants in the country. That's as the company faces growing pressure to move more production to the US. But it is vowing to keep investing on its home turf while expanding globally. TSMC's strong results came after Taipei signaling that a tariff deal with the US could come soon, as its negotiators left for fresh talks with Washington. Now, Taipei added that both sides are expected to announce when they have reached consensus. The island is seeking to cut tariffs on its exports from 20% to 15%. Now, Taipei, which is a major chip producer, is also looking to secure favorable treatment for semiconductors. Taiwanese chips are not subject to the levies, but Washington has imposed 25% tariff on certain AI chips, such as NVIDIA's H200 AI processor. Meantime, China is working to set rules that will control the number of advanced AI chips domestic companies can buy from foreign manufacturers, says the Nikkei. This follows a decision by the US to greenlight sales of NVIDIA's H200 chips to China. NVIDIA can now sell its second most powerful H200 chips to Chinese buyers with some conditions. The Trump administration's decision drew criticisms from US lawmakers and former officials. They say the move erodes America's AI edge and threatens to electrify Beijing's military. Even though demand for NVIDIA's advanced AI chips is robust, it faces significant regulatory hurdles as Beijing weighs supporting domestic chipmakers instead. Chinese customs have told agents that H200 chips are not permitted to enter China. The government also reportedly telling tech companies not to purchase US chips unless necessary. China's central bank will cut some sector-specific interest rates as it seeks to boost lending to support economic growth. The People's Bank of China says it will lower interest rates on its structural monetary policy tools by a quarter percentage point to 1.25% from this coming Monday, and signaled that there is still room for broader rate cuts this year. Other measures the bank has implemented to boost credit include an additional 500 billion yuan in lending for small businesses and the agricultural sector. Economists expect China's economic growth to slow in 2026 from last year. The forecast underscores the pressure on policymakers to address structural vulnerabilities and to deploy additional measures to sustain long-term growth. Experts say the easing today targets weak spots in the economy and may effectively help banks lower their liability costs. China's yuan eased right after the PBOC announcement, but quickly pared off some of those losses. It's relatively flat against greenback, 6.967 to the dollar. Meantime, Chinese stocks extending losses, pausing a blistering start to the new year after regulators moved to rein in speculative trading. The Shanghai Composite ending the day a third of 1% lower. Shenzhen, the second worst, though, bucking the trend up 0.4%. Hang Seng Index also down by 0.3 today. Now, the tightened rules seen as a bid to cool a $1.2 trillion rally in Chinese markets this past month. Shares of Trip.com extending losses from yesterday after regulators opened an antitrust investigation into the company. The stock plunged as much as 22% before trimming some of those losses to end around 19.2% lower. A possible snap election in Japan, bringing fiscal and monetary policy concerns back into focus, and it has put the Japanese yen under pressure. But fresh warnings of potential intervention by authorities helping the currency rebound to an 18-month low. The yen also relatively unscathed at 158.34 to the dollar at the end of trade today. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, in a meeting with Japanese officials, has emphasized the need for sound policy to address excess moves in the currency. Meantime, the benchmark Nikkei 225, after posting record high yesterday, closed 0.42% as the yen's rebound weighed on exporters, as well as a red-hot rally in tech stocks losing steam. Fiscal concerns are stemming from fears an election will delay the passage of a budget and debt bill. A failure to pass these legislations will leave a huge hole in state coffers. Nearly a quarter of Japan's budget is said to be funded by these new debt issuance. James Ying, client portfolio manager at East Spring Investments, weighs in on the yen level that may trigger an intervention from policymakers.
I would think in terms of a psychological step in line in the sand, I think 160, around the 160 level would be a time when the government would be considering stepping in. As the finance minister mentioned, the yen intervention is not out of the equation. And also for an overly weak yen, that has not been politically palatable given the inflationary impact on consumers and how much that impacted their public support in the election both earlier this year and last year as well. So they do have the political incentive to step in if the yen becomes too weak in their opinion.
Muji operator Ryohin Keikaku shares jumped to a 3-month high after first quarter earnings beat expectations. The stock rose more than 11% intraday. That's its biggest gain since October. Operating profit surged 29% to $179 million for the quarter ended November. Stronger global sales, supply chain improvements, and tighter control on price markdowns contributed to the strong showing. Now, sales climbed across Japan, China, Southeast Asia, the US, and Europe, underscoring Muji's resilience in China and its expanding footprint in Western markets. Alibaba announced a major upgrade to its flagship consumer-facing AI application, Qwen. With the latest update, the app will be able to complete end-to-end tasks across Alibaba's ecosystem, enabling users to manage multi-step requests through a single voice or text command without switching apps. Alibaba made a big push into the consumer AI market late last year, directly challenging rivals such as DeepSeek and ByteDance Toupao. Qwen has more than 100 million monthly active users 2 months after its launch back in November. But investors struggling off the tech giant's move, shares in Hong Kong fell more than 3%, ending the day 2.6 in the red. Chinese nationals will be allowed visa-free entry into the Philippines starting January 16th. Travelers from China may stay in the Philippines for up to 14 days without a visa for tourism or business only. Privilege applies to arrivals through Manila's NAIA and Cebu's Mactan Airport and cannot be extended or converted into another visa type. Authorities say the move supports trade, investment, and tourism, while security checks will remain in place. The policy will be reviewed after a year. And that's it for business. Oteli.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. On that note, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Japan and the Philippines tighten defense ties, signing new military pacts as tensions rise across the region. An expert will be joining us after the break to basically break down the bilateral ties and the regional risks. Plus, China's interest in Greenland and the Arctic region. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China and Canada hailing improving bilateral ties as Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney makes an official visit to Beijing, the first trip by a Canadian leader in 8 years. Taiwan signals more U.S. arms deals ahead, with 4 packages still pending Congress approval. It follows the announcement of a record $11 billion package last month, the largest ever for the island. Japan and the Philippines sign 2 major defense pacts, including a deal to share military supplies and services, with Tokyo also funding facilities to house Manila's Navy boats. Now, for more on this, we are joined now by Lucio Blanco Pitlo III. He's the president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies and a research fellow at the Asia Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation. Well, thanks very much, Lucio, for joining us this evening. So, first up, help us understand this. What does this the defense pacts actually unlock that wasn't possible or practical before? So, if let's say there's a confrontation at sea tomorrow, what changes?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I think the Japan-Philippines Agreement on Defense will allow for a greater interoperability between the 2 countries to be able to respond to contingencies, including, of course, in the flashpoints like the South China Sea. And this would allow Japan to provide assistance for the Philippines to develop Manila's maritime capacity, including its Coast Guard, but also with the reciprocal access agreement and the training, including the military also.
So, of course, the next question is how this is being read in Beijing. So if this pact makes Japan a more ready partner in the Philippines, what would Beijing worry it enables?
Well, both Japan and the Philippines are archipelagic maritime countries. They have vast maritime domains, and Japan has certain capacities in terms of disaster response, but also in terms of maritime domain awareness, maritime patrol, that it can help the Philippines in terms of these capacities. For sure, both Manila and Tokyo have concerns about developments across the Taiwan Strait, given the proximity and in the Philippines part, the presence of its huge community in Taipei. And so I think for Philippines and Japan to increase security coordination and consultation to be able to respond when something happens in the region is viewed in the Philippines as something positive because it will allow the Philippines to have a security and a diplomatic partner and at the same time capacitate the country's military and the Coast Guard, which is long overdue. And given the capacity of Japan, I think both in terms of financing, the buildup of the Philippine Coast Guard and the Philippine Navy, I think the training that can be provided by Tokyo can go a long way in terms of addressing the long overdue modernization deficit of the country's armed forces and the Coast Guard.
So if we widen the lens beyond the South China Sea, it's also about what happens, right? I mean, if a Taiwan crisis spills into the Philippines' geography.
Yeah, certainly. I think Philippines is quite concerned about developments in that space, given the close location of its northernmost island province of Batanes with southern Taiwan. The fact that it has a big community in the Taiwan. And at the same time, the Philippines also needs to balance its relations with China. And so it needs to reassure Beijing that these developments, this defense deal with Japan will not in any way target any third country, and that the nature of this arrangement is defensive, that it would help capacitate the Philippine Coast Guard and military, and that this is more for like a deterrence, defensive posture, and to be able to respond to contingencies, and not in any way be used as offensive platforms to launch attacks against third country. And I think that is the part where the Philippines have to do more, and for China to try to understand the Philippine security concerns in this area.
And all of this sort of being framed around principles. We have Japan and Philippines. They talk about upholding a rules-based order. But how much weight, does that language carry today? When we've seen the U.S., accused of banding those same norms in places like Venezuela and potentially Greenland.
Yeah, certainly recent, developments like the attack in Venezuela by the U.S., the capture of President Maduro, now is being tried in the U.S. This, of course, doesn't sit well with U.S. attempts to call out China in the South China Sea or in the Taiwan Strait. And so I think this is where the Japan-Philippines increased bilateral defense security talks and coordination and activities with the Reciprocal Access Agreement and with this acquisition and cross-servicing agreement. These are part of Philippines' efforts to diversify its defense partners and to bring in capable partners to help ensure rules-based order in the region, given, of course, some concerns about U.S. reliability and some demands from the U.S. for its allies, including in Asia, to step up in terms of defense spending, which might be difficult for the Philippine scenario right now, given tight fiscal space. And so Japan's entry can help the Philippines ensure that U.S. remain invested in the region and that rules-based order will be maintained not only through working with U.S., but also with other allies and partners like Japan, Australia, and other capable allies and partners in the region.
Okay, so just going forward, if you had to pick one clear a sign that this whole Japan-Philippines cooperation is shifting the regional balance, what would it be?
Well, I think that Japan is trying to project that it is also a partner for the region, not only in terms of economics and technology, but also for security. And should U.S. decide to falter in its commitment, or there would be questions about the durability of U.S. security guarantee, concerns about NATO with U.S. designs over Greenland, and how will that bear on U.S. allies in the region if U.S. will demand territory in exchange for security guarantees. I think Japan is trying to project that, it can be an alternative. It can be one partner for the region if in case such scenarios in the future happen.
All right, we'll certainly be looking out for those key signals there that you've just mentioned. Thanks so much for your time. Lucio Blanco Pitlo, the third president of the Philippine Association for Chinese Studies and also research fellow at the Asia-Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation. Well, Greenland is expecting a surge in European military units arriving for a joint exercise amid an escalating U.S. threat of annexation. Well, the island's prime minister says that more NATO boots are expected to be on the ground in the coming days. Germany, Sweden, France and Norway have confirmed the deployment of military personnel this week for drills with Danish troops who have already arrived in a territory. Now, their planned drills comes after a meeting between American, Danish and Greenlandic officials failed to resolve fundamental disagreement over the island. Now, while Danish and Greenlandic representatives acknowledged U.S. concerns about Arctic security, they firmly rejected the idea that Greenland could become American. Denmark, which is responsible for Greenland's defense, has previously warned that an attack on the territory effectively spelled the end of NATO. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has been extremely vocal about his ambitions to seize control of Greenland, including by force, if necessary. He has repeatedly claimed that acquiring Greenland is a national security imperative and that Denmark is unable to counter Russian and Chinese influence in the Arctic region. However, Greenland reiterated that there is no Chinese footprint on the island.
We had an abandoned American military installation years ago. There was a global tender. I personally intervened in this. in order to avoid, any Chinese footprint. So there's absolutely no Chinese footprint in Greenland.
For more, we are joined by Ross Cullen, who is covering the story for CNA in Greenland capital, Nuuk. So, Ross, you've been on the ground over the last few days. What do you make of all that talk of Chinese presence that the U.S. claims Greenland is at risk of?
Good morning, Ateli from here in Greenland. Now, over the last few days, walking around Nuuk, I have to say I have not seen any Chinese warships or Chinese commercial interests, and I have not heard Mandarin being spoken here. That doesn't mean that there isn't any Chinese presence on the island, but we've also heard from the Danish Foreign Minister after those talks in Washington yesterday, when he said that according to Copenhagen's intelligence, there have not been Chinese warships seen in Greenlandic waters or in Danish waters or in the waters around Denmark's other self-governing territory, the Faroe Islands, for at least 10 years.
Right. Remind us again, what really is China's strategic interest in the Arctic and on Greenland?
Well, China's strategic presence in the Arctic, Ateli, is mostly focused along the Russian coast, the Russian Arctic. The longest border with the Arctic region is the Russian frontier, and Chinese icebreakers certainly do have influence up there. They're also interested in the opening Northern Sea route with the ongoing climate change crisis in the Arctic region. We are seeing that the sea lanes remain free of sea ice for longer each year, allowing more maritime traffic in that part of the world. So that's certainly somewhere where China is interested, but it has also pushed back on these claims. We've heard from Donald Trump that the area around here is covered in Russian and Chinese warships, according to the US president. European sources have pushed back on that, and China also says that, in its opinion, the Arctic should be an area for international cooperation. Ateli?
Well, thanks for that report. Ross Cullen covering the story for CNA in Greenland capital, Nuuk. Well, meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has declared that his country's reliance on foreign processed critical minerals poses a national security threat. He signaled a proclamation stressing the need to diversify supply chains and to reduce dependence on what it calls adversarial nations. Measures include boosting allied processing capacity, investing in non-Chinese facilities, and using trade stabilizing tools to counter price swings and volatility. Well, these minerals are used to make high-tech products, ranging from cell phones to advanced military gear, with China dominating the global mining and processing capacity. Now, he set a 180-day deadline for deals to be negotiated, tasking U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, as well as Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, to oversee these efforts. Well, the two are expected to negotiate new or expanded agreements to, quote, adjust imports of processed critical minerals and products based on those materials. Mr. Trump is authorized to impose measures such as high tariffs, quotas, or mandatory minimum import prices should no deal be reached within the deadline. For more of our coverage, do check out our CNA Correspondent podcast titled How the U.S. Handed Control of Rare Earth Minerals to China. It's available on our website, CNA or Me Listen apps, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Coming up on East Asia tonight, Japan's opposition parties joining forces to form a new political party as the country braces for a snap election that's expected to be held in weeks. Plus, cheap deals may not be what they seem. How Gen Z sourcing agent in China is helping businesses dodge costly mistakes. Japan's main opposition party and a former ruling coalition partner have agreed to join hands and set up a new political party to prepare for a snap election widely expected to be held in weeks. They say they want to present a united front against a right-leaning shift in politics. CNA senior correspondent Michio Ishida has this report.
Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has signaled her intention to dissolve the lower house soon after Parliament convenes next Friday, paving the way for a snap election. Officials of her ruling Liberal Democratic Party said that she intends to give details at a news conference next Monday. Opposition parties are now accelerating preparations to contest the 465-seat lower house, with the ruling LDP and its coalition partner, the Japan Innovation Party, currently holding a razor-thin majority. The leader of the largest opposition Constitutional Democratic Party, Yoshihiko Noda, said Komeito had approached them with a proposal of forming a centrist political party, and they accepted. Komeito ended a long-time partnership with the LDP in October last year over issues including the LDP slush fund scandal. Komeito's leader, Tetsuro Saito, said the move to form the new party aims to unite forces supporting centrist policies and counter a rightward shift in Japan's politics. He added that he hopes lawmakers from the ruling LDP and moderate Democratic Party for the People can join them. Some analysts say Ms. Takaichi hopes to use high public approval rating for her cabinet to gain a stronger mandate through a snap election. But local media have also reported dissenting voices within her ruling LDP, with some saying the government should first focus on priorities such as passing the national budget. Japanese media say the election could be held as early as the 8th of February. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
Well, meantime, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has arrived in Japan this afternoon for a 3-day official visit, and she's scheduled to meet with her Japanese counterpart, Sanae Takaichi, where the two are expected to reaffirm the strengthening of bilateral ties, which includes the expanding of security cooperation. The two leaders last met at the Group of 20 meeting in Johannesburg in November. The Italian leader will be in Japan until Saturday before traveling to South Korea for a summit with President Lee Jae-myung. Time now for some headlines from media outlets in East Asia. Kyodo News reports Tokyo police have arrested a man for allegedly stabbing 2 others at his apartment as they were carrying out proceedings for the attacker's forced eviction. One of the victims has died, while the other sustained minor injuries. The former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol is set to receive his first court verdict on charges related to his imposition of martial law in December 2024. Yonhap News Agency says his sentencing hearing on the obstruction of public duty, among other charges, will be heard on Friday afternoon. And Beijing is looking to recruit social workers for postings across various disputed islands in the South China Sea. South China Morning Post reports authorities are looking to hire 11 people, quote, dedicated to island and community service, and that applicants should be able to cope with long-term postings in remote maritime locations. Sourcing goods in China from abroad can be a risky and costly affair for companies. CNA's Money Mind talks to one Gen Z middleman who aims to prevent cheap imports from becoming expensive mistakes.
Cheap furniture online looks like a good deal until delays, extra costs, or quality problems show up, and then you pay. Such problems start when businesses place their orders. And that's why a new kind of middleman exists, not to sell products, but to manage risk and save money for consumers downstream.
我叫杨小晴 Kate， 今年24岁，是一名 sourcing agent。我做这个职业已经有1-2年了，然后主要的就是帮国外的客户对接国内的供应商，然后帮助他们再来中国，就是帮助他们在中国这边找到供应商，帮他们节省时间和精力。
Kate doesn't sell to consumers. She works with businesses, the ones sourcing furniture, lighting, and building materials from China. Her job shapes what consumers end up buying, how much it costs, and whether it arrives at all.
我这些客户 会分成2类，有一些他们会亲自来中国这边，有一些他们是不会来的。不会来的原因主要是可能有2个，可能他们没有那么多时间，或者是太远也不想花这个机票钱，因为他们不一定是买很大量的产品，可能只是买一些比较小的产品，买几个样品先试一试，所以他们就会发很多他们需要采购的东西的资料给我，然后我根据他们给我的这些资料，然后再对应的去找相应的供应商，然后帮他们挑选，找到靠谱的供应商，然后可以帮他们就先采购1-2个样品。
Online sourcing looks straightforward, but a factory listing doesn't tell you what happens when something goes wrong.
其实现在来说，很多客户都可以从互联网上就直接对接到工厂。我在这里的价值就是可以帮他验证这个工厂到底靠不靠谱，因为有很多就是互联网上的东西，你看到的不一定是真实的。
For overseas buyers, the challenge isn't just cost, it's communication.
They should have it already.
And when communication breaks down, mistakes become expensive very quickly.
For us from Europe, it's difficult to find the way to speak here, and not everybody speaks English here in China.
When I take him to the factory, I can help him translate, negotiate, something like that. And sometimes I will also help him find some supplier.
Sometimes the mistake isn't the product. It's assuming a deal is cheap before checking what it will actually cost to move it. Especially when global trade rules change overnight.
我之前有一个客户，他是美国亚特兰大那边的客户，他在中国这边买了一批瓷砖，瓷砖的价格在中国是很便宜的，相对于他们美国那边来说，所以瓷砖在美国那边算是反倾销产品，所以他们政府就会额外的收多很多税，然后就导致了这个客户一直把这个瓷砖放在工厂的仓库里面，然后一直没有拿走，已经2-3个月了。
Kate doesn't just connect buyers and suppliers, she filters risk. She checks whether companies really exist. She goes to factories herself and verifies that what's promised is what gets made.
Well, you can catch the full segment and more episodes of CNA's Money Mind on YouTube, MeWatch, and CNA.Asia. And I hope you've enjoyed this edition of East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at CNA.Asia. And look us up on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.